Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 19, Biome Point of View. The Terran military had scrambled several hundred fighters into upper orbit, which fanned out in a defensive alignment. Our communications began to malfunction while we were ascending through the atmosphere, which explained the silence of the initial squadron. There would be no patching into the ground headquarters. It was only us and them. I finally knew what it was like to be on the other side of our invasions. It only took one look at the enemy forces to recognize our craft, the same ones I had piloted for years. They seemed to be swarming the planet from all sides, like insects descending on a fresh carcass. Something had clearly changed since our last encounter. The Terran fleet were spewing missiles with relentless fury, but our opponents swatted them away with ease. The once omnipotent nanite weapons were disabled with pulses, while antimatter and plasma weapons bounced harmlessly off their shields. We were caged in, outnumbered, and our only option was to claw our way out. The odds did not seem in our favor. If that wasn't enough reason for concern, a massive destroyer lurked at the back of the enemy formation. I knew it was brimming with weapons designed to render a planet uninhabitable, through radiation and atmospheric poisoning. The only positive I could find in the situation was the AI didn't seem to have replicated the worst human weaponry, but it didn't need to. It could neutralize the onslaught of projectiles and simply weather the storm. The humans would run out of explosives eventually. What's the plan? I flicked through the holographic firing display, trying to stop my hands from shaking. We do have a plan, right? Carl glanced over his shoulder. We improvise, just like last time, remember? Last time we almost died, I snapped. Almost is the key word. The human offered a reassuring smile, but something told me he was convincing himself as much as me. Look, the shields clearly got an upgrade, but the thing about shields is they aren't great at stopping smaller projectiles. I said we try mini explosives. I stared at him in disbelief. Your missiles aren't working, so you just want to shoot it with smaller missiles? We can shoot it with bullets too. You know, kinetics. You really think any of that will work? Honestly, I don't know, but it's worth a shot. Carl ran a hand through his frosty hair. If they want to take this planet, they'll have to get through us. Their next target could be Earth. On the bright side, it couldn't work any less than what the humans had already tried. Carl wasn't wrong that smaller weaponry could penetrate shields, but it would require multiple hits. As soon as we moved in, though, I had no doubt we would sustain heavy fire. The enemy was likely banking on aggressive action. We'd have to chip away at their armor, striking at the ship's most vulnerable compartments. I knew exactly where to aim for, but whether I could hit those targets in a split second, in the heat of battle, was another question. I switched over to the miniature missiles. They were typically used as interceptors according to the computer, but could be used for offensive purposes if necessary. We accelerated toward the enemy fleet, and our allies fell in behind us, inspired by our advance. Five AI ships closed around us, ready to pick us off. I targeted the nearest craft and offered up a silent prayer to the universe that our desperate, suicidal play would work. A salvo of explosives, tiny enough to fit in the palm of my hand, sailed through the inky blackness. They helmed in on the vessel's right flank, slipping through the shields. The armor repelled the attack with only a dent and a few burn marks to show. But I had found the sweet spot, right by the propulsion systems. The ship began to veer off course as it lost its steerability. Carl weaved off to the right, dodging a string of plasma rounds fired by the damaged vessel's partners. I was ready to turn my attention to a different ship, but the human wanted to go for the kill. He swerved back toward the crippled craft, narrowly avoiding a collision with it. He positioned us right above it, giving me a clean look at the target. Same spot, by him. Fire now, he shouted. I launched another volley without hesitation. This time, the ship lost all semblance of control, plunging into a dizzying tailspin. The planet's gravity, well, only encouraged its forward trajectory, drawing it toward the surface. The Terran ships parted around the doomed craft, and forged ahead with renewed spirit. They emulated our tactics, hurling tiny missiles at the opposing fleet. Who would have thought to attack a fortress with pebbles but the humans? The enemy vessels concentrated all of their firepower on our advance. They had been caught off guard at first, but they would compensate quickly. A few of our allies met an untimely end, as potent plasma rounds found their mark. These human ships weren't designed to take a beating. We had to rely on their quick, nimble frames to evade incoming projectiles, because a single shot spelled death for us. Carl dipped down to avoid the stream of fire, taking advantage of our three-dimensional battlefield. Switch over to bullets. We're gonna hit the beast's soft underbelly. Clever tactics. Typically in space warfare, the high ground, relative to your opponent of course, was considered advantageous, which was why our ships confronted each other on the same plane. It was also why they wouldn't expect us to carry out an assault from below, especially while they were preoccupied with the charging ships above. While kinetics were fairly weak, I found them much easier to aim than their more powerful successors. Also, it was possible to fire dozens of rounds in rapid succession without so much as a pause. I unleashed a spray of bullets at the ship's underside, hoping to bombard them into submission. The sight of atmosphere venting indicated that we had indeed poked a few holes in their armor. Unfortunately, none of the ships seemed incapacitated. We were more of a nuisance than a threat. A warning flashed on the weapons screen, indicating a heat-seeking missile locked onto us. I suddenly wished that we hadn't drawn their attention. I cleared my throat. Carl, there's... I see it. Try not to lose your lunch, okay? He replied. I don't waste food, but how... I stopped as our ship switched directions in an instant, beginning an upward climb at full speed. Acid gurgled in my throat, and I tried to swallow it down. Oh, that means puke, doesn't it? You're not going to outrun a missile, you know. Wasn't planning on it. The missile was mere seconds from catching us as Carl righted the fighter, once again on the same heading as the enemy. The human steered us straight towards a rival ship, showing no signs of slowing down. As we barreled toward a collision, I couldn't help but wonder if his plan was suicide. Surely he was going to turn away and enact some defensive measures? We brushed just over the enemy's hull, so close that I swore our metal skeletons grazed each other. Our craft snaked around theirs, ducking down on the other side. The missile, which was meant for us, instead plowed into them, and their ship absorbed the worst of the antimatter punch. Its shield held, but barely. The flicker of electricity around its shell hinted they were faltering. I didn't need instruction from Carl to seize this opportunity. If its defenses truly were down, we only had a brief window before it recovered. I switched to our plasma rounds, hoping they would work at last. The shots scorched through its vulnerable flesh, turning it to a withered husk in seconds. I knew its occupants were dead when the ship did not deviate from its aimless drift. If there were any survivors, they would have fired back. Our skirmisher twisted through the enemy formation, zigzagging to avoid a slew of plasma fire. Our little ship was becoming quite a thorn in their side, and they were no doubt keen to take us out. For a moment, I felt like we were dancing through the night sky. There was an effortless grace in Carl's evasive maneuvers, and the thought crossed my mind that nothing could touch us. I must have jinxed it, because that was when a round clipped our left wing. The fighter's frame rattled beneath me, and I wondered if the craft would break apart. By some miracle, we hobbled on to the rear flank, still in one piece. Our ship's condition was worrisome. She was slowed, tilting to one side and running dangerously low on ammo. I wasn't sure how much fight she had left in her, but we had to press on. If this was our last stand, so be it. I took a glance around at the battlefield, trying to think of our next move. A sea of shrapnel and wounded ships had spawned amongst the living, perhaps best described as a graveyard. The enemy appeared to have suffered more losses than the Terrans, but it didn't matter. As one of their ships fell, another popped up in its place. The humans fought with blinding intensity, but our forces were dwindling too quickly. We couldn't hold the line much longer. The planet-killing destroyer was creeping ever closer as well. If it was allowed within firing range, it would have decimated the life forms below, and that would be the end of the refugee program. Our last-ditch efforts needed to be focused on stopping it. Some of the humans seemed to have come to the same conclusion. A few dozen Terran ships were encircling the beast, hitting it with every type of ammunition, from every angle. Nothing seemed to harm it, or even slow it down. I wished I could suggest a weakness to target, but to my knowledge it didn't have any. "Carl, you see the destroyer?" I asked. He frowned, squinting through the viewport. "That big, ugly trapezoid?" "Yes, if we're going to lose, we need to take that ship out at all costs." "I understand." The human fell quiet. I expected him to argue that we weren't going to lose, but he only sighed. "Byam, it's been an honor." "Likewise." The ship's engines accelerated for perhaps the final time, and we sailed towards certain death. That would be the end of Chapter 19 of Why Humans Avoid War. I'm sorry for any background noise and yelling and nonsense you've had to listen to if my mic did pick up on it. If you're going to bed soon, I hope you have sweet dreams, and if you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. If you wouldn't mind, consider subscribing, leave me a comment down below telling me why you did or didn't like this, and leave a like. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 20, Byam Point of View. The destroyer functioned as bait in a way, forcing the human fleet to overextend. It lured the largest, most ferocious Terran battleships into its vicinity, and kept them out of the larger fray. While our big guns battered the Doomsday ship with laser fire and missiles, they were easy targets for the enemy to pick off. If those guys couldn't breach the destroyer's shields, none of our ships could. I decided our best play was to cover them and buy them a bit more time. I noticed the enemy surging around one particular human battleship, a Titan-class behemoth. It appeared to have sustained heavy damage, but was still limping toward the planet killer. Perhaps they were planning a bombing run at point-blank range? Whatever the case, our foes clearly didn't want it to reach its destination, or else they wouldn't have diverted 15 craft to attack a single ship. I glanced at the sensor data from our computer and did a double take. The energy readings from that Terran battleship were off the charts. The warp drive seemed to be destabilizing. My first thought was that an enemy shot had hit the reactor, but the computer detected only minor damage to that compartment. Rather, it appeared the humans had shut off the cooling system, as though they were trying to cause a quantum meltdown on purpose. What are they doing? The reactor is going to go critical, I hissed. Carl checked his own display, then chuckled. Son of a gun, they're using that ship as a bomb. That is suicide. No, that's sacrifice. There's a difference. Why don't we give those guys a hand? I readied the kinetic weapons without further comment, this was hardly the time to muse about the human courage. We swooped into the fray, lighting the enemy up from their blind side. A few of the ships snapped their attention to us, giving our allies a slight reprieve. Their first instinct was likely to pick us off with plasma rounds, but Carl pulled us in dangerously close to their position. Any shots fired at us would risk hitting their own ships. Not that it would make a difference. Our opponents had precision weapons and would target us without batting an eye. As 2 antimatter missiles locked onto us, I prepared myself for the final flash and hoped that we had done enough. In our ship's weakened state, there would be no evasive maneuvers. "Deploy the last mini-missiles by him," Carl barked. My fingers obeyed before my brain processed his request. If their original purpose was as interceptors, perhaps they could stop the inbound projectiles. I watched with bated breath as the tiny warheads arced through space, planting themselves in the path of the missiles. The antimatter blast was set off before reaching us, but I knew we wouldn't be so lucky next time. Our vessel peeled back before they could target lock us again, circling for another pass. I could feel the ship shuddering each time we turned. In her current condition, we were pushing the limits of her capabilities. The warning lights panel looked like abstract art, with more colorful indicators blinking to life every second. Most of the enemy craft had turned their focus back to the suicidal battleship. It was easy enough for them to brush off any Terran skirmishers that came to their allies' aid. However, one of their fighters had tracked our movement and veered off from the pack. It was zipping toward us at full speed, plasma weapons primed for the kill. I lined it up in our sights, resigned to another shootout. At this point, it was more about taking as many of them with us, rather than surviving. My resignation morphed into pure terror as I saw a predatory, crazed smile on Carl's face. Humans usually had that expression right before they did something insane. "Let's play a little game of chicken, shall we?" he growled. A high-pitched yelp escaped my throat as our ship accelerated to full speed, and I was flung back in my seat. The floorboards quaked beneath my feet, and I noticed new warnings popping up in the engine column. What exactly was this chicken game the human referred to? I was pretty sure I didn't like it, since it seemed to involve playing with our lives. We swerved right into our adversary's path, putting us moments away from a head-on collision. All coherent thoughts evaporated as the enemy fighter stared us down, despite our imminent demise. Carl made no attempts to slow down or turn away. My instincts screamed to lunge forward, grab the control column, and steer us out of danger, but I couldn't move. At the last possible second, our opponent deviated from their course. I exhaled a sigh of relief, realizing that I hadn't breathed in much too long. No wonder I was so lightheaded. My entire body was trembling, overwhelmed by the fear chemicals pumping through my veins. Carl, meanwhile, clapped his hands together, grinning from ear to ear. "Cowards! Cheer up by 'em. They blinked, not us." I massaged my temples, groaning. "Carl, I'm okay with dying, but we don't have to actively encourage it." "Nonsense. Like we say on Earth, I'd rather go out with a bang than a whimper," he said. "Our friends will ram the bastards in 30 seconds tops, so hit them with everything we got." The route back to the Terran battleship's side was clear after our little stare-down. We soared past its assailants, and I unleashed every bit of ammunition we were carrying, even types I knew wouldn't work. None of our hits landed any serious damage, but fortunately help had arrived. Most of the remaining human vessels had joined the suicide mission, protecting the battleship at all costs. I saw a few hurl themselves into the line of fire, using their puny skirmishers as shields. Others rammed into enemy ships, pushing them away from the battleship. The humans were unyielding in the face of death, undeterred as their allies fell around them. When pressed against a wall, their bloodlust bordered on insanity. I drained the last of our ammunition, watching as the battleship crossed the final stretch. It buried its nose in the destroyer's side, and the impact was enough to tip its destabilized reactor over the edge. The meltdown unleashed staggering amounts of energy on the planet killer's insides. To my amazement, it burst apart at the seams. The once untouchable destroyer fractured into several pieces, which began to crumple in on themselves. Our sensors detected magnetic fluctuations hinting that their own reactor was cascading out of control. It teetered on the edge of order and destruction for a few tense moments, before spilling into chaos. The scraps of the mighty ship fused together into a deformed monstrosity, folding up like a paper ball. Our communications crackled to life, startling me. Whatever had been jamming our transmissions must have been aboard the destroyer. The voice belonged to the same officer who had tried to stop us earlier. All Terran ships, you are ordered to retreat. Abandon system. I repeat, abandon system. Get word back to Earth at all costs. I was shocked to hear the word retreat called out over our feed. I hadn't been certain the word even existed in the human lexicon. Carl leaned forward, a frown on his face. Sir, what about the refugees? Oh, it's you. The officer's tone carried a mixture of disdain and disappointment. You guys bought us some time. We're sending transports out now. Whether we can warp out before we got shut down, I don't know. The Devourers will be on you in seconds. They're everywhere. You need an escort. We're probably going to die, I'm aware. If you stick around, you will too, pretty boy. My friend shook his head, clicking off the radio with a frustrated sigh. He glanced back at me, sympathy in his gaze. No doubt he was aware of our lack of ammunition and the damage to our ship. There was nothing more we could achieve. We had done everything we could. Any reasonable being would leave and live to fight another day. He's right, Byam. Carl finally spoke. If I thought it would make a difference, I would stay. But with this ship... I tried to suppress the guilt fogging my mind. It wouldn't be fair to ask Carl to die a pointless death, after all, just because I had my son's death on my conscience. But I knew then and there abandoning my people would haunt me for the rest of my life. That even if the humans won down the road, I would be the sole survivor of an extinct species. Of course, I know. I was surprised by how curt my tone was, flat and emotionless. It didn't even sound like my voice. To Earth, then. My friend plugged in the coordinates with haste, as we didn't have a moment to spare. A cluster of enemy ships were nearing our position, surrounding us on all sides. Most of our surviving allies had already jumped away, which made any stragglers easy targets. I hoped our warp drive was still working, because if not, we were about to get dusted. Our surroundings shimmered as we slipped into hyperspace, and the battlefield faded away. My mind drifted to thoughts of vengeance, anger burning in my chest. Someone or something needed to pay for what had happened today. That would be the end of Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 20. If you liked it, like the video. If you didn't, let me know why. If you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then I wish you sweet dreams. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 21, Kylon Point of View. A human hand clamped down on my shoulder, jolting me out of my slumber. Wake up, General. The voice was firm and insistent. We need to talk. I groaned, taking a glance at the clock. It was less than an hour since I drifted off, and I sorely needed the sleep. As much as I liked Commander Rykov, he better have a good reason for waking me. Can it wait until later? No, we have a problem, a major one. Was that fear in his voice? My brain snapped to attention in an instant, and I rolled out of bed without further protest. If it frightened the commander, it could only mean one of two things. Either the humans had done something terrible, or there was an apocalyptic threat on the horizon. I wasn't sure which one I was more worried about. Rykov led the way out of my quarters, weaving a path through the flagship's winding corridors. His silence was unsettling, and rather out of character. As tempting as it was to demand answers, I had a feeling I was going to get them soon enough. We turned into a conference room where two individuals were waiting for us. I recognized the Devourer refugee from our earlier adventures, but not the blonde human sitting next to him. The human was slumped in his chair, looking defeated and exhausted. Byam had a distant look on his face, not even reacting to our presence. The commander cleared his throat, frowning with displeasure. Captain Larson, please repeat what you told me, including the part about leaving a refugee camp to their deaths. Captain Larson flinched as though he had been slapped. With respect, sir, our fighter was crippled and out of ammunition. It would have been an exercise in futility. I don't want your excuses. Just start from the beginning, Rykov said. Well, to keep a long story short, we set up a refugee camp on a military base, which the Devourers attacked with no warning. Their shields got an upgrade, none of our main weapons worked, and most of our fleet was killed in action. The blonde captain paused, gauging my reaction. I managed to keep my expression neutral, but a knot of fear was forming in the pit of my stomach. Our CO ordered us to retreat from the system. We believe they'll be en route to Earth shortly. It had been mere days since the Terrans' decisive victory over the Devourers, and the weapons had already been rendered ineffective. I shuddered as I recalled how easily the humans had blown through the capital's defenses. The Federation's artillery seemed like toys in comparison. If none of their firepower worked, we didn't stand a chance. I couldn't help but feel responsible, as I was the one who persuaded Rykov not to glass their world. In hindsight, perhaps the Devourers should have been put down, while chance permitted. It would have been the pragmatic option, though not the moral one. To my recollection, Ambassador Johnson said something along the lines of, "I'd rather they die than us," in her infamous Senate speech. Now, with the entire galaxy facing extinction, maybe the Federation would understand those words. Did this base have nanite weapons? I asked. Captain Larson sighed. Of course, all of our outposts have them. I didn't even want to address the implications of that comment, since it meant that humans possessed thousands of those reality-bending missiles. A stockpile of that size. Were the Earthlings planning to level a small galaxy or something? There has to be some sort of weakness, some chink in their armor, I mused. Smaller weapons, Those don't exactly pack a real punch, though. Larson drummed his fingers on the table, eyes rolled back in thought. They're vulnerable to ramming tactics. Not that I'd try that first. Those options are less than ideal, I agreed. How soon will they reach Earth? My best guess, a few hours. Right, we were doomed. I glanced at Commander Rykov. Please tell me you have one of your terrible plans. Well, not even a smirk from the dark-haired human. He was avoiding eye contact, which wasn't a good sign. I think we have to bring out the doomsday weapons. I almost keeled over in shock as I tried to process his words. Those nanite bombs, which could disintegrate an entire fleet, weren't their last resort weapons? According to their simulations, those had a 5% chance of destroying the universe. Whatever Rykov was referring to, it had to be truly appalling. I'm sure I'm gonna love this, I grumbled. What exactly are they? The commander looked at the silent biome, his frown deepening. We call them grav bombs. They can be used to cause a stellar explosion. Some in the Federation will see us as monsters, they already do. But we need to finish the job. Humanity had the power to snuff out stars? They could render entire systems uninhabitable in a flash, damning species with the wave of a hand. By now, I was well aware that they were a dangerous species to befriend, but their capacity for violence never ceased to amaze me. Why would they even dream up such a thing during centuries of peacetime? No doubt leaders in the Federation would ask the same question if this plan worked, and perhaps rightfully so. At least they would be around to raise those concerns. I couldn't see another way forward. If the Devourer AI wasn't eliminated, it would be our worlds reduced to dust instead. Captain Larson leaned over, nudging by him in the shoulder. What do you think? Do it. The Devourer refugee shifted slightly, face void of emotion. There are fates worse than death. We've suffered enough. And you, General? Do I have your blessing? Rykov asked. Always. One thing, though. Won't the Devourers see us coming, try to stop us? I'm sure they have left some ships behind. We'll have to fight our way through. What about the ones heading for Earth? According to Biome, they're programmed with a kill switch. If they lose contact with the homeworld, we wipe out the AI, we kill two birds with one stone. I grimaced. What we were about to do amounted to genocide, and I can't say it sat well on my conscience. Millions of enslaved devourers would perish along with the AI, and there would be no opportunity for us to rescue any of them. Despite his calm words, the strain on the commander's face told me he felt the same burden. It has to be done. We should set off as soon as possible, I said. Rykov nodded. Right then. Larson, Biome, disembark at once. My guards will escort you out. But sir, we want to join you, the captain protested. That was an order. You both look like hell. The commander turned toward me, and I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look so good himself. General, follow me to the bridge. I have a private matter to discuss on the way. I loped after him, finding it much easier to keep up with his brisk strides than before. The nanite therapy must have had a positive impact on my fitness. I certainly felt stronger, younger even. That reminded me, I needed to work out a deal to bring the technology home. It can improve quality of life, revolutionize the field of medicine and bolster our forces. With human innovations in our pocket, we could bring about the new golden age of the Chitauri. Perhaps it's not the right time, but I hesitated, trying to find the right words. If we survive all this, I was thinking the Chitauri could help with your nanite research. If you want partners, that is. Yes, that's what I wanted to speak to you about as well. The commander ran a hand through his hair, sighing. I promised you no more bullshit, so here's the truth. You understand how dangerous nanotech can be. The last thing Earth wants is it falling into the wrong hands, so they don't want it leaving our territory under any circumstances. I see. That wouldn't happen to include me, would it? The human was silent. Well, shit. Am I a prisoner? I wouldn't do that to you, but others will. I've liked having you on board, and I thought maybe you could stick around as my first officer. You're suggesting I join the Terran military? Yes. A command post sounded better than a dark cell, that was for sure. A permanent stay with the humans wasn't quite what I had in mind, but it didn't sound like I had any choice in the matter. Rykov clearly had known what exposing me to the nanites would entail, but I couldn't fault him since the alternative was for him to let me die. However, the thought of never seeing home again was almost too much to bear. And something told me the humans would make a public procession out of my transfer, using it for PR purposes. My legacy would be destroyed, my name cursed and slandered among my people. I would be remembered as the general who jumped ship at the first sign of trouble, and that I could truly not live with. Not my first choice, I said. I know. I'm sorry. Do you know what my people do to traitors, Commander? Because that is how they will see defection. The ones they capture, they gut from head to toe, then pour acid inside their bodies. And your bloodline is considered tainted for 100 generations. Your family mocked and beaten. Any feats you ever achieved burned from the pages of history, your name only spoken with the most vile curses. It would be better to die. Then we tell them you died. With honor. They don't know you're alive. That might be acceptable. I will think on it. My primary loyalties would always lie with the Chitauri, but perhaps I could find a way to guard their interests from afar, the same way the humans kept an eye on their neighbors. If it were up to me, our species would work together, but if the Terran Union was so determined to keep its progress to itself, a different approach was necessary. None of those concerns would be relevant if we failed in our missions, of course. The fate of the galaxy hinged on the next few hours, and it would be nice if just this once, everything went according to plan. That would be the end of Why Humans Avoid War Chapter 21. If you liked it, leave a like on the video, leave a comment for me telling me why you did or didn't like this. And if you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. And if you are going to bed soon, then I wish you sweet dreams. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 22. Kylon Point of View. The last official engagement I saw the humans partaking in, They deployed a total of 5 ships. That was all they needed. This time, they had raised a proper armada, gathering thousands of their finest vessels. Word had been sent to the Federation, informing them of the disaster at the refugee camp, and warning them to prepare for a devourer incursion in case of our failure. However, the Terrans opted not to request any military assistance or divulge the species of their plan. No doubt the speaker's sabotage was still imprinted in their memory. Earth's sudden mobilization, despite their given reasons, no doubt raised some alarms back in the Federation. The two parties deeply mistrusted each other in light of recent events, and I was doubtful that would ever wear off. Hell, even I was frightened of humanity at times. But now, as we worked toward our final confrontation, I was only worried about the humans, especially Rykov. Perhaps I didn't understand human body language, but his posture signaled pain to me. He was huddled over his holo display, head bowed, his shoulders sagged as though a weight had been placed upon them. Was he truly prepared to do what was necessary? I sidled up to him, nudging him on the arm. "Are you alright? You seem like you're having second thoughts." "Quite. Don't worry, I won't hesitate." The human sighed, shaking his head. "The people at home won't understand what we sacrifice, what we give of ourselves. Perhaps you don't either, General." "Dying? Almost dying? Getting shot?" I offered. Rykov chuckled bitterly. "Beyond that, you don't come back the same person. You have to live with the terrible things you've done, and you just try to convince yourself it was right." "It is right. Trillions of lives will be saved. I think there is honor in that," I replied. "Perhaps. There are no good choices today," he said. "But believe me, I take no pleasure." The ship rocked violently as we were thrown out of hyperspace, on the fringes of the Devourer system. I skidded across the floor, groaning as I collided with a metal chair. That hardly seemed like a controlled emergence. It seemed like we had run into a warp-disrupting field. The enemy must have installed some new defenses while we were away. I heard cursing a few lengths away from me and saw Commander Rykov on his knees. It appeared he collided headfirst with a workstation. Grimy red blood was streaming from his nostrils, and his nose was jutting unnaturally off to the side. That definitely was broken, and in my estimation, entailed a considerable amount of pain. I crawled over to the human. "You require medical attention. I can oversee." The commander picked himself up, gritting his teeth. "It's but a scratch. Soldiers, I want weapons powered up yesterday, shooting anything that moves that isn't one of ours." I limped after him, staring in disbelief. Was he really going to carry on like nothing happened? Humans were tougher than they looked. "Sir, we have another problem," an ensign called. "It appears that the enemy detached a breaching pod. A boarding party has infiltrated the ship." My antennae twitched in confusion. Since when do they board ships? "I think they have a special hatred for this one," the commander frowned, wiping a fresh stream of blood off his lip. "General, we're a little short on foot soldiers. I'd like you to meet up with my security team, the Manhanger. Take care of the welcoming committee. Keep them alive, if possible." Despite several tours on the flagship, I wasn't sure where the main hangar was, but I thought I could figure it out. The last thing I wanted was to look incompetent as the ship's soon-to-be first officer. I gave Rykov a nod, retrieving a plasma rifle from the weapons cart. The gun was much lighter than I remembered, which I attributed to the nanite enhancements. My departure from the bridge was swift, and I hoped that following my instincts would bring me to my destination. But after rounding a few corners, it became apparent I was heading in the wrong direction. The cupboards of pill bottles and syringes suggested that this was a med bay. There was There wasn't a physician in sight. Non-combatants were probably locked down until the ship was secured. I surveyed the walls, looking for a map. There had to be some sort of directions somewhere for evacuation procedures at least. My ears perked as footsteps echoed down the hall, and I sighed in relief. Perhaps these humans could steer me on the right course. I was about to call out, but then I realized something was off. Those weren't the heavy thuds of Terran boots. Instead, they were a tapping sound, like a raindrop striking a rooftop. I ducked into a doctor's office, peering around a wall. There were 5 devourer soldiers by my count, slinking through the hallways. They seemed to be sweeping the premises for any stragglers. I pressed my gun to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. My only hope was to ambush them and take out several before they knew what hit them. Shadows stretched past the doorframe, which suggested they would pass the office in a matter of seconds. My finger found the trigger as soon as they crossed my vision. A plasma round sailed through the lead soldier's forehead, and he crumpled to the ground. Fueled by survival instincts, I charged at the other 4 in an animalistic frenzy. Before they could shoot back, I had tackled another guy and rolled him on the top of me to serve as a shield. His friends opened fire, and I felt his body spasm as it was peppered with rounds. There was a pause as the weapons went on cooldown, and that was all the time I needed. Wriggling out from under the corpse, I picked off one with a shot to the chest, then turned to my rifle on the second. A volley tore through her neck, and she collapsed in a bloodied heap. 4 down, 1 to go. Theoretically, the last guy should have been the easiest to take out, but the opposite seemed to be true in experience. This one was watching me with sharp eyes and ducked just as I found my aim. My shot whizzed over his head, burying itself harmlessly into the wall. To make matters worse, my rifle buzzed in my hands, indicating that it was on a 5-second cooldown. Well, shit. His gun was almost recharged at this point, which meant I had to act immediately. I closed the distance between us with long strides, jabbing him in the gut with the butt of my rifle. With a sharp exhale, he stumbled backward, dropping his weapon on the floor. I reached for the loose firearm, but my action didn't go unnoticed. He kicked it away and moved toward me. Panic spurred me to swing my rifle at him like a club. Bashing him over the head didn't seem like the worst idea. Well, at least until I actually tried it. His hands shot up in a blur, catching the gun by the barrel. Before I knew it, the weapon had been wrenched out of my grasp. As it clattered to the ground, I realized I was in trouble. Hand-to-hand combat was never my forte, as it wasn't something the Jatari military trained in. With this guy's godlike reflexes, he certainly had the upper hand. I barely raised my fists in time to block a series of punches. While I was trying to parry his strikes, he swept my feet out from under me. Pain shot up my spine as I smacked against cold metal. He sank to my level in a flash, placing me in a headlock. Thrashing about, clawing at his face, none of it seemed to do any good. His grip around my airway only tightened. I could feel my awareness dimming. A burning sensation pulsated through my lungs as my body screamed for oxygen. It was becoming increasingly hard to form coherent thoughts. A shroud of darkness was creeping into my perception. In a few moments, I would slip into its embrace. There was a sickening crunch, which I only faintly registered. My assailant's grip slackened, and I pulled free, gasping for air. An ache lingered in my throat where his arm had been, and I figured I'd have some bruises to show for our encounter. Without intervention, it could have been a lot worse. What were you thinking, engaging a group of them by yourself? I glanced up to see Mac, Brykov's security officer, accompanied by a team of 12 others. You were a no-show, and now I see why. I got lost, I spluttered. This ship is a damn maze. Mac paused. I see. Well, I gave your buddy there a good knock upside the head. When he wakes up, he'll be in the brig. Come with me, if you can walk. Thanks. I owe you one. I struggled to my feet, following after the burly man. Where are we going? The bridge. I figure the boss wants you back. What? I'm sure there are more of them. We have to. There were. Past tense, he growled. Just, look at the scenery as we walk. A series of questions floated through my mind, which I figured were better left unanswered. Was he saying they cleared the entire ship? It couldn't have been more than 15 minutes since I set off on Rykov's orders. The meaning of his statement became apparent as we entered the main passage up to the bridge. Bodies were splayed out in the hallway, with blood and brain matter splattered on the walls. One of the corpses had a severed arm shoved down its throat, while another was sawed clean in half. I didn't even want to know. The brutality was revolting. Scenery? I stared around me, dumbfounded. What the fuck, Mac? These guys are slaves. Did you have to butcher them? Rykov said alive, and you... Calm down. These are no slaves. See the brands on their necks? The human lowered his voice. Your friend Vian warned us about them. They're part of a doomsday cult that worships the AI, and wants to help it bring about the end of days. Always on the front lines when they destroy the world. I frowned. Even so, don't you think this is a bit excessive? Not at all. In fact, I wish they suffered more. I fell quiet. Deriving pleasure from another being's pain seemed cruel, yet Max spoke as if it were the most normal thing in the world. It was in glimpses of their worst impulses that humanity terrified me. They were always a step away from becoming the monsters they despised. That would be the end of Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 22. If you liked it, like the video. If you didn't, leave me a comment telling me why. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. And if you're going to bed soon, then I wish you sweet dreams. Side note, this cold weather now is fucking insane. I'm in Arkansas right now, and it's like negative 20 out right now, and there's no heat in my room. Literally wrapped up in sheets and blankets, and my toes are still freezing. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. I hope you're in better circumstances. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 23, Kylon Point of View. I hurried back to my post by the holodisplay, eager to get as far away from the mangled bodies as possible. Through the lens of the viewport, I glimpsed the battle raging among the stars. While I had been preoccupied with the foot soldiers infiltrating our ship, the crewmates on the bridge had been clawing their way through the sea of enemies. A few hundred Allied vessels were tucked away at our side, trying to withstand a barrage of plasma fire. To their credit, the Terrans were hurling an equal amount of ammo at the hostiles. The humans were hoping to find any weakness to exploit, any chink in their armor, but it was to no avail. The Devourer's shields were absorbing anything we threw at them. Our advances slowed to a crawl, and we were on the verge of being pushed back. General, Commander Rykov gave me a nod, his voice taut with pain. Glad to see you in one piece. Yes. Others didn't share my good fortune, I muttered. The human's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? We suffered casualties? I averted my gaze, unable to look at him straight. Not to my knowledge. I mean, your boys carved up the aliens nice and good. If I didn't know better, I'd think a wild animal got to them. Oh, I see, Rykov sighed, massaging his forehead. Human emotions can run hot. My orders were clear, but I suppose they got a bit carried away. I'm sorry you had to see that. I leaned over the command console, having nothing further to say on the matter. What was important now was completing the mission. And to do that, we needed to find a way through the enemy's stalwart defensive line. But that seemed next to impossible, now that they were privy to the Terran playbook. More human ships were slipping off the radar by the second. We needed to take drastic measures before we lost an entire fleet. What could we do that was completely unpredictable and would catch the Devourers off guard? Some sort of antimatter missile slammed into our hull, sending ripples through the flagship's frame. The overhead lights went out, replaced by a faint orange glow emanating from the floorboards. The computer systems went offline for a moment before humming back to life. A few of the humans glanced around nervously. Primary power source inoperable. Emergency generator activated, a mechanical voice said. Shields at 12%. I shook my head in disbelief. This is the same ship that breezed through the Federation's orbital defenses without a scratch? That's not the first hit we took. Just the straw that broke the camel's back, Rykov growled. The human idiom was lost on me, but I thought I understood the gist of it. We're running out of time, then. Doesn't sound like we can take too many more hits. What do we do now? Earth is depending on us, General. We carry on. We fight to the last. There's nothing else to be done, he answered. That's not going to be enough. They're one step ahead of us at every turn. Well, what would you suggest exactly? We call on God to smite them? We retreat. You've got to be kidding, General. I'd rather die than live a coward. I won't just let my planet burn. I'm no coward. You know that. Breaking through their formation is impossible. We need to bait them forward. Lure them to us. When they chase us, we outflank them. Rykov pursed his lips, considering my proposition. Despite the conviction in my voice, I wasn't convinced that my ploy would be effective. But with the human ship count ticking lower, our shields waning, and our forward trajectory stalling, it was a necessary gamble. I just hoped that the commander would arrive at the same conclusion. Okay, so we drop back. What makes you think they'll follow us? He asked after a long silence. I tried to imitate a human shrug. It's just a hunch. They're arrogant, and from what I've seen, they don't like to leave survivors. A hunch, you say? He frowned, casting a final glance at the holo display. Very well. I'll have an encrypted message sent out to the fleet. For all our sakes, I hope this works. The commander called out a series of orders, setting the new plan into motion. The flagship banked sharply, reversing our course into a matter of seconds. We accelerated at full throttle. The quicker we got out of plasma range, the better. Our allies tailed after us, but the Devourers were left without any vessels to engage. The enemy remained stationary for a moment. No doubt they were bewildered by the humans' sudden departure. A coordinated retreat, while the fight was still in the balance, had to raise suspicions, after all. But the chance to finish us off before we could regroup or jump to warp must have been too tempting. Our opponents tore after the withdrawing ships, guns blazing. I breathed a sigh of relief, even though that was only the first step into the plan. The next part was the most difficult and would take the humans out of their comfort zone, acting like prey. The Devourers needed to smell weakness. The Terrans slowed their breakneck pace, allowing their pursuance to close the distance. An onslaught of missiles preceded the enemy's arrival, all bound to our largest battleships. I counted at least 20 warheads heading for the flagship and hoped we could weather the storm once more. The first impact was almost indetectable, and it seemed that the damage might not be so bad. Then several missiles struck in quick succession, and all hell broke loose. In their weakened state, our shields strained to keep up with such concentrated force. The floor quaked beneath my feet, powerful enough that I could feel my teeth rattling. A terrible groan came from the ceiling above, as though a pipe had burst. Sparks darted up the wiring on the walls, leaving an acrid scent in the air. My guess was that the cooling systems had taken the worst of it. Fire reported in the engine room. Shields at negligible power, the computer's voice was emotionless, as always. Evacuation of all personnel recommended. Not happening. Rykov clapped his hands together, a maniacal smile on his face. His ship was literally on fire, and he was excited? And our turn now, boys. It's our turn now, boys. Light 'em up. The Devourers zipped toward our position. Clearly, they had thrown all caution to the wind. The Terran vessel parted around them as they arrived, granting them access to the heart of the formation. We were swallowing them like a tasty morsel, and I don't think they even noticed. Well, not until they were already surrounded on all sides. After corralling the enemy, the humans nailed them with precise, relentless measures, similar to how the flagship's shields had crumbled. The Devourers' defenses just weren't designed for a 360-degree bombardment. The logical AI master would have never planned for such a scenario, because there was no valid reason for the fleet to get boxed in like this. The humans softened up the enemy's shields first, grilling them with steady laser fire from all sides. This was followed by the deployment of missiles, as soon as their defenses began to wane. The primates seemed to have infinite supply of world-ending explosives, as usual. Massive battleships and nimble fighters alike blinked out of existence. No match for the combined power of antimatter and fission weapons. In panic attempts to escape, some of the Devourer ships collided with each other. Those vessels also became little more than 1,000 fragments scattered across the darkness of night. Set course for the star at maximum speed, Rykov barked. No time to waste. An ensign cleared her throat nervously. Sir, our engine is overheating. The commander crossed his arms, frowning. Did I stutter? The flagship cruised through the remnants of the fleet, finally having a lane into the Devourer's system. I just hoped we could complete our mission before their offensive reached Earth. This was a race we couldn't afford to lose. The fate of humanity was hanging on the balance. A few enemy ships had lingered behind while their partners walked into our trap, though these vessels were in the minority. A cluster of 5 battleships blocked our path, and that was all they could muster. There were no orders on the bridge, not even an acknowledgement of their presence. The flagship sped on, full steam ahead. Our exposed frame was scorched with plasma fire, which burned a few holes in our metal hide. As atmosphere began to vent, automated processes sealed off the damaged ship sectors. It was going to take more than a few puncture marks to dispatch this Terran monstrosity. I winced as I realized we weren't slowing at all, and were mere seconds from plowing into the defensive quintet. The Devourer's ships were vulnerable to ramming tactics, sure, but there were really no other options. If the humans wanted to piss away 1 trillion credits, they could have done that without wrecking their finest craft. Hell, forget the economic toll. With a fiery situation in the engine room, a jolt might be enough to turn us into a smoldering wreck. Even under normal circumstances, there was no guarantee we'd make it out in one piece. I knew it was hopeless to reason with the humans, since brushes with death seemed to be incentive to them. All I could do was find something to hold on to, and send up a silent prayer to the universe. Even if we survived, this was going to be a bumpy ride. And that was Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 23. There's a few chapters to go. If you've enjoyed your time here, please leave a like, leave a comment telling me why you did or didn't like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you've got, if you're going to bed soon, then I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 24. Kylon Point of View. As we hurtled toward an imminent collision, the sounds of coughing filled the bridge. An involuntary shudder ran down my spine. While I knew it was rather commonplace for their species, I could practically feel the rattling of their lungs. The deteriorating conditions inside the flagship were affecting me as well. My eyes were burning from the billows of the smoke that pooled in the air, and my skin was smoldering from the temperature, which had risen to an uncomfortable degree. With a glance around, I saw many of the humans tugging at the collars of their shirts. None of them looked too pleased with the environmental status either. If we stayed on board this vessel too much longer, we would all suffocate. With the shields down and the interior aflame, I expected the ship to crack apart on impact. But the Terrans, true to their suicidal tendencies, pressed on anyways. The 5 Devourer cruisers did not budge as we bore down on them. They only seemed to huddle closer together. As the final line of defense, they had to stop us, even at the ultimate price. No protest, General? Rykov's nose was swollen to the size of a small fruit, but he was smirking anyways. I expected the word stop at least once. I shook my head. Why bother? I don't want to waste my final seconds of existence. You're quite the cynic, you know. Hell, we might survive this, he chuckled. My antennae twitched in confusion. Is that supposed to be reassuring? The broad hull of our ship plunged through the enemy line. Even with inertial dampeners at work, a jolt propelled me several lengths forward. I found myself prone on the ground yet again, wincing from another rough landing. The nanites in my veins could only mend so much tissue damage at once. I imagined I'd be black and green tomorrow. Before I could regain my footing, the humans rolled the vessel sharply to one side. An undignified yelp escaped my lips as I slid shoulder first into a workstation. What were they doing? Had their steering systems gone haywire? I held the flagship start to tip back in the other direction, and clutched onto the base of the desk for dear life. An awful screeching sound resonated through the walls of our vessel, most likely our tough hide peeling away. But there were no worried callouts from the pilots or the computer, so the erratic rotation had to be intentional. Why would the humans want to tumble about right in the wake of a collision? I pondered the question for a moment, and then an idea occurred to me. The Terrans were twisting their ship like a knife, carving a deeper gash. We were burrowing our way through the enemy craft, and tearing up their inner workings as we went. A crunching noise echoed from the bridge's exterior wall, drawing my attention. I saw a crack snaking its way from floor to ceiling, with several tendrils branching out from the root. Sure, our opponents had been taken out of commission, but our own ship was hanging together by a thread. Severe damage reported to all sectors. Structural integrity compromised. The computer's voice cut through the dead air, advised to power down the ship at once. Rykov cleared his throat. Computer, you don't recommend evacuation anymore? Negative. That is no longer possible, came the reply. Why not, exactly? The hangar bays and escape pods have sustained severe fire damage. They are inoperable. Advised to sound out a distress signal and await rescue. The inferno spread had escalated quickly, and if it continued at the current pace, it would reach the bridge in a matter of minutes. We had grinded to a halt in the aftermath of the collision, and we're currently wedged nose first into the enemy vessels. Any more impacts would fracture the flagship's exterior, so that meant breaking through the other side was not an option. The commander scratched his head, frowning. Right, you heard what the computer said. All power to the thrusters. And once we clear of this wreck, we gun it to the Devourer's star. Should be a walk in the park. Maybe I wasn't the best at listening, but that definitely was not what the computer had said. Our engines, which were nearing liquefaction by now, revved to life. We inched forward, slicing our way through the last of the enemy's plating. The ceiling overhead began to sag as its support faltered, and I figured it would come down on us. What hurt the most was knowing how close we had come, and that we had failed in completing the mission all the same. Then, with a terrible shudder, the flagship was clear of the wreckage. It had sawed 5 enemy craft in half, leaving behind only idle debris. Our frame quivered, still deciding whether or not to collapse. By some miracle, it was holding together, for now. As cheers erupted around the bridge, I looked toward the commander. The man had found a seat behind a weapons console, displacing one of his ensigns. It was a matter of seconds until we passed the Devourer's star, and he was ensuring that the grav bomb was prepped for deployment. The terrible task of genocide was still ahead of us. Sorry about stuttering over my words. I'm a wee bit drunk. There was no semblance of a smile on his face, despite our hard-fought victory. His eyes were turned out the viewport, toward the serene blue and white sphere that hung in the distance. A tear rolled down his face, and I suspected it had nothing to do with his physical injuries. Human compassion was so mysterious, and so antithetical to their violent instincts. The burden of slaughtering an entire species would eat Rykov up from the inside. He had admitted as much. Why would a man who so clearly despised this mission take the helm for its execution? The only answer I came to was that he wished to save his subordinates from the guilt. The same person, he said. I didn't want him to change. I didn't want him to be anything like the cruel humans who maimed for sport, who savored the kill. Without thinking, I grabbed Rykov by the shoulders and threw him unceremoniously to the ground. The nearest crewmates tensed up at my unprovoked assault on their leader, but I ignored them. My fingers acted up on autopilot. The first step was to confirm the target, then... What the? The commander rose to his feet, looking more confused than angry. He noticed a few handguns aimed at me and signaled for his men to stand down. You really shouldn't attack someone on their own ship. Stand aside, now. No, I muttered. Disbelief flashed in his eyes. What do you mean, no? I won't let you do this to yourself. You deserve better. My stomach churned as we glided into position across from the vibrant orange star. It was a dreadful feeling to have the power of annihilation at your fingertips. Let this one fall on my conscience. I appreciate the thought, but I'm giving the orders here. It's on my conscience either way, General, he replied. It hits different when you pull the trigger. I'd expect a soldier to know that. My hand was trembling, my voice hardly more than a whisper. I pressed the firing mechanism before I could talk myself out of it. No more General, by the way. That's First Officer, or just Kylon to you. I was taken aback as Commander Rykov embraced me. Why did humans show affection by trying to smother people? I gritted my teeth, resisting the urge to squirm out of his grasp. It would be over soon, wouldn't it? You're a good friend, Kylon, he said. I sighed. Yes. But you smell like vinegar. Get off of me. The human withdrew, stepping back. That's not very nice. I know. It's part of my charm, I replied. You. Alright. Quit staring, everyone. Time to get moving. The commander swept a stern look around the bridge, and the crewmates snapped back to work. We want to be long gone when this star blows her top. Let's hope we have enough juice to make it home. Slipping into hyperspace was always rough, but this time blew all previous experiences out of the water. The pressure condensing in my ear canal stripped me of my hearing, and my stomach felt as though it was tied up in knots. Every particle of air was squeezed from my lungs, and my feet were glued to the floor. I was utterly powerless, trapped in a lifeless shell of a body. I wanted to scream, then to throw up, perhaps both at once, but my lips were locked together. The minutes stretched on for what felt like hours, and my desperation built to a frenzy. The paralysis dissipated as we emerged in range of Earth. I crumpled to my knees, spilling my guts on the floor. Embarrassment rushed through my veins until I realized most of the humans were double over as well. There was a reason ships with environmental regulation issues weren't supposed to enter hyperspace. If the system hadn't been about to go nova, I don't think even the deranged species would have tried it. As my senses returned to me, the most important concern crossed my mind. Had we dropped our payload in time to save Earth? There was no sign of Devourer spacecraft by the outer planets, which meant one of two things. Either they never reached the Terran system, or they had already taken it. Unknown vessel, you are trespassing in Terran space. Your transponder is offline, which is a violation of planetary laws. Identify yourself at once. A male voice cackled over the speakers. Rykov staggered to the holo display. Orbital command, I would hope you'd recognize your own flagship. Jesus Christ! The man's pitch rose sharply, presumably from shock. Rykov? What on earth happened to you? Your bird looks like it got chewed up and spit back out. We did crash it at full speed, but that's not the point. Request emergency landing on Mars station. Need emergency vehicles on site. Understood. You are cleared to dock at any open port. A strange mix of relief and sadness fogged my mind as we glided toward our destination. The knowledge that our endeavors had saved the Federation from certain death was a source of pride. But I wish there had been another way. If not for our arrogance, if we had finished what we started on that rescue mission a short time ago, perhaps there could have been. Humanity would be called to account by its galactic neighbors when they learned what we had done today. Maybe, just maybe, the two parties could learn from their past mistakes and find a path to reconciliation. If the Federation insisted on making the humans an enemy, they might get more than they bargained for. This war was over, but the next one, that was the one I truly feared. The Book of Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 23. Chapter 24, my mistake. If you liked it, like the video and leave a comment. If you didn't like it, dislike it, and also leave a comment. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, then I wish you the sweetest of dreams. Sorry for stumbling over my words in this one. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao. No, I suppose not. What are you getting at? I'm saying someone armed them. Someone also gave the populace reason to rebel by flooding their economy with cryptocurrency, making it so they couldn't afford basic necessities. Speaker Retke paused, meeting my eyes. It would stand to reason the same entity is responsible for both things, and the Terran Union has already been linked to the financial attack. I lowered my gaze. I'm not saying humans did it, but if we did, it would have been for the greater good. For centuries, the Xanik administration has been relentless in its pursuit of expansion and conquest. Their government required drastic changes to put a stop to it. A series of anxious whispers rippled through the assembly as my words were practically an admission of guilt. I risked a glance at the audience and noticed Ambassador Johnson in her assigned seat shaking her head. It was clear she didn't approve of my response, but what else could I say? This new speaker was a bit too clever and had already put the pieces together on his own. Denying it would just make us out to be liars and give the Federation further reason to distrust us. Retke waited for the conversation to die down before responding. A naive, simple-minded way of thinking. What is that supposed to mean? I demanded. You assume that the next government will be any better. You do not consider the possibility that it may be worse, he replied. The old regime was elected by the citizens. It carried out the will of the people. You cannot solve systematic problems by killing a few individuals. I found myself agreeing with the speaker in spite of my allegiance. The modus operandi of the intelligence agency was asinine to me. I had been telling my brother as much for years. By toppling the Xanik Republic, they had created a power vacuum. In all likelihood, they were replacing a democratic aggressor with an authoritarian one. A tired sigh escaped my lips. Time will tell. Is that all? One more question. What happened to the Devourers? He asked. Their star went nova, and their system was destroyed. It was technically the truth. 3 billion years before its natural end, and right as a fleet was on its way to Earth. Convenient timing. Perhaps it was divine intervention, Mr. Speaker. I think not. This is your last chance to come clean, Commander. Don't force my hand. I don't know what you're talking about. Then I'll show you. If you'll turn your attention to the projector, you'll see footage from a classified stealth probe that was monitoring the Devourer system. Horror shot through my veins as a video began to play on the wall behind the speaker. It showed a lone vessel on approach to a luminous star. While the exterior of the ship was charred and flayed, the Terran emblem was still visible in the hull. It wouldn't have mattered if it weren't, since the make and model of the flagship was so distinctive. The Senate watched in stunned silence as the flagship deposited a capsule into the star's corona. Gravity did the rest of the work, drawing the projectile toward the surface. A sick feeling crawled into the pit of my stomach, and I wanted to beg Retke to turn the tape off. Instead, I just sat there, eyes glued to the screen. The speaker pressed the fast-forward button on his holopad, and skipped ahead to the star's final moments. The fiery gases swirled down toward the core, like water circling down a drain. With a shudder, the vibrant orb collapsed in on itself. It shrank until it was no longer visible. All that remained was blackness where the star had been. For a few seconds, the universe was at peace. Then, there was a blinding white flash that washed out of the camera's view. It only appeared on the projector for a moment before the transmission cut out. Suffice to say, that probe was a goner. So tell me, Was that a different ship that just happens to look like yours, Commander? Disgust briefly flashed on Reki's face before he regained his composure. You know, it would be nice to get a smidge of honesty from you humans. That bomb only has one purpose: the extermination of a species. Why would you build such a weapon? Please, enlighten me. My mouth felt dry, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Why did the Federation have to bear witness to that atrocity? The representatives shared aghast expressions, and panicked chatter began to spread through the chamber. I caught some of the phrases, like several people calling humanity monsters and demons. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. We built it because we knew someday extermination might be necessary. Look, there was no other way. Perhaps that is true, but what is necessary is not always right, he said. So you think we're wrong. You think we're monsters just like everyone else, don't you? I stood up from my seat, red-hot anger racing through my body. This whole trial had been a trap, hadn't it? No wonder Reki had such a calm demeanor. He had that footage in his back pocket the whole time. What is it that you want? Humanity kicked out of the Federation? Me imprisoned for war crimes? No, actually, I was going to ask you to lead our military. Impassioned protests broke out across the Senate, but the speaker raised a paw for silence. Friends, the humans cannot help what they are, but they're trying to change. They've never wronged us. They managed to convince us that they were the most peaceful species in the galaxy for centuries. Mistakes have been made by all of us. I want to move forward together without hatred standing in the way. I believe this human and his associates will make us stronger and safer. I gaped at Reki in disbelief. I don't know what to say. You can think about it, but know if you accept, this pattern of lies and omissions must end here. And for the universe's sake, don't invent any more bombs. I think humanity has more than enough as is. I'd like the galaxy to still exist tomorrow, you know? Perhaps there was a future where we could be friends with the Federation once more. This would be different, but maybe they should be. It was my sincere hope that we would never use our worst weaponry again. I wanted the galaxy to still exist tomorrow, too. That would be the end of Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 25. Whether you liked it or you didn't, like or dislike the video and leave a comment for me. If you're going to bed soon, I wish you sweet dreams, and if you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 26. Eula point of view. Were the humans actually getting a reward for the genocide of an entire species? The Federation might as well remove the words peace and equality from its mission statement if the speaker was putting those savages in charge of the military. An abominable race like theirs did not belong in positions of power, and it never would have happened under my leadership. I had done everything I could to expose their nature, and just when I thought I was getting somewhere, the narrative shifted. The humans framed me as the villain, and the Federation bought it hook, line, and sinker. One moment, I was their beloved speaker, champion of democracy, protector of the innocent. The next, they kicked me to the curb, all on the basis of a few unsavory memos from a year ago. Where had I gone wrong? Was there anything I could have done differently? There would be plenty of time to think after I cleared out my office. I rummaged through the final drawer of my desk, searching for anything worth bringing home. Beneath a stack of documents, there was a single framed photo. It was turned upside down and covered by a thick coating of dust. This picture clearly hadn't been touched in years. Curiosity sparked in my chest, and I flipped it over. A younger version of myself was standing side by side with Ambassador Johnson, holding a document. I remembered that day. We had been at the signing of a war crimes treaty, which the humans sponsored. They said they wanted to mitigate suffering, and they had seemed so genuine in their commitment to peace. At the time, I wanted to be just like them. A growl rumbled in my chest. I hurled the picture to the floor. The frame shattered, sending shards of glass everywhere. Careful. You wouldn't want to step on that while you're leaving this office. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. For the last time at that. A curse escaped my lips as I glanced behind me and saw Ambassador Johnson leaning against the doorframe. She was the last person I wanted to speak to. I had no idea how long she had been there, but her smirk suggested she had seen enough. Come to gloat? You got what you wanted, just leave me be, I spat. The human disappeared, and for a brief moment, I thought she might actually leave me alone. Instead, she returned with a broom and a dustpan and began mopping up the glass shards. I clenched my teeth, repulsed by her proximity. You and your filthy species ruined everything. My life, my government, my job. It's not that bad. Lots of positions out there to fill, she chirped. You know, I heard they're hiring at Galaxy Mart. I could see it, you in a nice green vest stocking shelves. The look would really suit you. Oh, fuck off. Get out of here, I screeched. Ambassador Johnson snickered and then, at last, departed from my office. I picked up my box off the floor and looked around the room a final time. This was supposed to be my life, but somehow, it had been taken away. It didn't matter, though. I would earn back the fickle citizens' support by spreading the truth about the humans to anyone who would listen. Maybe I could make a blog, or float around as a guest on the talk shows, whatever it took to get the message across. There was a knock on the door, and my skin prickled with annoyance. That was a human gesture to request entry, which meant Ambassador Johnson had come back. Wonderful. Stupid human. You've had enough fun. I'm on my way now, I muttered. A male voice, cold as ice, answered back. I'm not human, and you're not going anywhere. Something smooth and metallic pressed into the back of my neck, which felt like a gun. Fear surged through my body as it dawned on me what was happening. The humans had sent an assassin after me, hadn't they? I couldn't say I was surprised, but I couldn't fathom why he didn't just pull the trigger. I turned to face my assailant with slow, non-threatening movements. To my surprise, he was telling the truth. He wasn't human. I didn't recognize his species either. There were no flat-nosed, purple-skinned bipeds on the Federation's registry, to the best of my knowledge. Who are you? I stammered. The strange man nodded toward my desk chair. Why don't you take a seat? I inched back, following his instructions. We should talk about this. Whatever the humans paid you, I can give you more. Double, even. The humans have nothing to do with this. I'm here because everything I've ever known, everyone I've cared about is gone. You have no idea what true pain is. Look, if you're depressed, there are ways to get help. You don't have to hurt me. You don't have to hurt anyone, okay? That's where you're wrong. I'm the last survivor of my species. Someone has to pay for that. Something clicked in my head, although it sounded ludicrous. How could anyone have survived a supernova? You're a devourer, I whispered. His facial muscles twitched. I don't like that word. My name is Byam. Okay then, Byam, listen to me. The humans were set on genocide from the beginning. There was nothing I could do. I forced a sympathetic expression onto my face. It was difficult to think with a gun pointed at my head, but I knew I needed to redirect his anger. Commander Rykov is the one you want. He is here, in the building. He killed your people, not me. No. I needed to understand why this had happened, and it all leads back to you. Rykov tried to rescue us, but you sabotaged the stealth ships. In fact, with your sabotage, you tried to force the humans to kill us. He said, voice shaking with anger. They could have finished evacuating my planet if they didn't need a detour to deal with you. If you didn't start a civil war, and if they didn't need to repair the ship after, ultimately, you are responsible. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. I needed them to slip up so the entire universe could see their true face in all of its ugliness. The humans have been conning the galaxy for centuries while they plot and build up an arsenal to kill us all. It was a calculated risk to save the Federation from an evil you can't fathom. A calculated risk? Is a planetary extinction event some minor sacrifice to you? You are the evil one. You don't deserve the nitrogen you breathe. Say goodbye to your miserable existence. It seemed that talking Byam down was out of the question. The Devourer had a crazed look on his face. His veins were about ready to pop out of his neck. His finger was hovering over the trigger as he tried to hold the gun steady. I wanted to call for help, but he would take me out as soon as I reached for my holopad. Barring a miracle, this seemed like it would be the end. The door swung open, and Ambassador Johnson waltzed in, looking at a piece of paper. Eula, old pal. I had some time on my hands, so I drafted up a resume for you. Take a look. The human glanced up, and the color drained from her face as she spotted the gun. I wasn't sure whether to beg for help, or to talk Byam into shooting her instead. Leave now. This has nothing to do with you, he hissed. Johnson raised her hands in a placating gesture. I've read about you in the mission reports. Byam, right? Put the gun down. You don't want to do this. Yes, I do. I want this vermin dead. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he quickly wiped it away. I tried to save my people, and I failed. Vengeance is all that's left. It's not your fault. Please don't let your pain and your hatred define you, Byam. You're better than that. Revenge won't help in the long run. I don't care if it helps. Why should she live when millions will never see another day because of her? How is that fair? It's not. People like Eula are terrible. Believe me, I agree with you. But if we stoop to their level, they win. I'm too petty to let them win. That's where we differ, human. I'm more than happy to let Eula have her victory. The Devourer checked the sights a final time, grinning at me. Byam was about to dampen the trigger when Ambassador Johnson lunged at him, grabbing his dominant arm. She tugged it down as the gun went off, blasting a hole in the floor. The duo tumbled to the ground, wrestling for control of the firearm. My mind was reeling as I stared at the skirmish. Why would the Ambassador try to help? This was her chance to get rid of me, without any blood on the hands of the Terran government. Humans were supposed to enjoy carnage anyways. There was no reason for her to put herself in the line of fire for a sworn enemy. Ambassador Johnson twisted at his wrist, trying to loosen his grip on the gun. Byam reached out with his free arm and picked up a stray shard of glass from the floor. With a swift motion, he jabbed it into her thigh. The human yelped in pain, and her lapse in concentration allowed the devourer to break free. He shrugged off her grasp and began crawling away. The thought occurred to me to run or to join in the fray, but I was paralyzed. Something in my brain had shut off, and I couldn't flip it back on. Byam struggled to his feet, using the desk for support. He leveled a gun at Ambassador Johnson, who was nursing her wounded leg. Crimson blood had soaked through her navy blue pants, turning them purple. I didn't know much about human anatomy, but she must have been hit in some sort of blood vessel. "Stay down. I don't want to hurt you," he pleaded. The gun swiveled back toward me, and I steeled myself for the inevitable. There was no sense in begging for forgiveness from either of them, because I wasn't sorry. Sure, my methods hadn't been perfect, but I was the only one brave enough to stand up against those human wretches, to make sacrifices for the well-being of the Federation. There was a sharp pain in my forehead. I crumpled in my seat, watching as the world became fuzzy. It was all so grainy, so out of focus. I was dimly aware, in the recesses of my consciousness, of Byam running from the scene of the crime. My ears registered the words of Ambassador Johnson calling for help on her holopad, but I was too far gone to process anything but the cold sensation washing over my body. Nothingness overtook my senses, and I sank into the arms of the void. That would be the end of Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 26. Whether you liked it or you didn't, leave a like or a dislike on the video. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and if you're going to bed soon, then I wish you sweet dreams. If you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. Ciao. Why Humans Avoid War, Chapter 27. Kylon Point of View. Terran Command had reluctantly furnished a new vessel for us after determining that the flagship was damaged beyond repair. This one had nicer accommodations, since its primary function was in a diplomatic capacity. Its maiden voyage would be tonight, as the humans were hosting an ensemble of Federation dignitaries and officers. The plan was to give a brief overview of Earth's military history, as well as its current arsenal. The new speaker was making a genuine effort to soothe things over, but I knew it would be difficult. Many of the representatives still struggled with the truth, and Eula's death had raised new suspicions, especially since Ambassador Johnson had been in the room when she was killed. While security footage of the assassination showed Byam pulling the trigger, that hadn't stopped conspiracy theorists from claiming the Terrans orchestrated the whole thing. That the altercation between the ambassador and the devourer was staged. To be honest, I wasn't convinced they were wrong. Not that it would bother me if the humans were behind it. What nagged at me was witnessing my own funeral on television. I felt like a traitor to the Jatari, and that made me sick to my stomach. All I wanted to do was return home, to reclaim my old life, to stand behind the helm of my own ship one last time. Kylon, you look unwell. I lifted my head, spotting Rykov at the entrance to my quarters. He must have just returned from the capital in advance of tonight's conference. Between his bloodshot eyes and the splint on his nose, I thought he looked worse than I did. I forced a smile. "Welcome back, Mikhail. Where's that General Rykov now?" He winced. "I'm sorry. I never meant to steal your job. I haven't accepted yet. I can..." "Don't be stupid. You deserve it." "I don't know what to do, but thank you. Anyhow, I just wanted to let you know, you should be off the ship within the hour. It wouldn't be good for either of us to field questions about how you came back from the dead." "I figured as much." Good. There's a shuttle waiting for you in the hangar bay. I've made arrangements for you to spend a couple days planetside. Might help you adjust to human culture, and at worst, it's paid time off. Anything beats dealing with politicians. You have fun with that. At least these ones aren't... shouldn't speak ill of the dead. The mention of Eula piqued my curiosity, but I figured I should refrain from asking about her. If the Terrans did arrange her assassination, then it wasn't a subject they wanted to discuss. Learning their secrets never ended well. At any rate, it was how I got stuck here in the first place. When it came to the humans, some questions were best left unanswered. I stared at the floor, trying to quell the resentment brewing in my mind. We probably shouldn't speak about her at all. Rykov must have read something in my expression because his eyes narrowed. You want to know if we killed Eula, don't you? As far as I know, we weren't directly involved. That implies you were indirectly involved, I pointed out. Well, I feel sorry for Byam. A remorseful expression crossed his face, and his voice became subdued. I sensed something was off last time he was here, after the refugee camp was destroyed. But I never thought this would be the result. Nobody could have expected that. I mean, how did he even get a gun into the hall in the first place? That's the crazy part. He tagged along with the press and slipped the gun into a sound engineer's bag. Security barely gives the media a second glance. Once he got past the metal detectors, he just pickpocketed it back. Clever bastard. Perhaps he has a chance on the run. Maybe. For what it's worth, I hope we never find him. Something tells me you won't look that hard. I think I've already said too much, Gylon. I fought back the scathing reply in my head, which was that it didn't matter. There was no love lost between Eula and the Terrans. Of course, they wouldn't be chomping at the bit to bring her killer to justice. Who was I going to tell that wasn't human anyways? Right then. Well, I suppose this is goodbye, I said. For now, take care of yourself, alright? With that, Rykov waved farewell and disappeared down the corridor. As solitude presided once more, my longing to reach out to my people grew insatiable. In the name of friendship, could I watch the Terran military, at best, render my species obsolete? Was preserving my image really more important than ensuring the survival of my race? The humans slumbered now, but their history showed what they were capable of under the right circumstances. It seemed unlikely that they would set off a supernova in the middle of the night, but the problem was that they could. The only way to counter such a possibility was to catch up to their technology. Like how Earth had superweapons tucked away just in case. If the worst came to fruition, the Jatari deserved a fighting chance. Risks be damned, this was my final service to my planet. I fetched a razor from my go bag and sliced it across the palm of my hand. Then my fingers uncorked an empty water bottle and I allowed my blood to drip into the container. The nanites sealed off the wound with haste, but not before a usable sample had seeped to the bottom. I pried a piece of paper from my notepad and laid it out on my desk. As I fished out a pen, the words seemed to flow from my hand of their own volition. The new arms race is upon us. The entire Federation is scrambling to imitate human technology, but with this blood sample, we can be the first. This is just a taste of their classified genetic engineering project. Research in this field should stay our little secret. Building an arsenal should be the primary focus, but as you can see, there are civilian uses for the nanites as well. medicine, construction. Just don't let the humans see we've caught up. They wouldn't react well to us leveling the playing field. Hell, it might incentivize them to build something worse. Trust me, keep this one off the books. From a friend. I folded the note, then attached it to the bottle with a rubber band. I glanced at my holopad, confirmed the route to the guest chambers. As a newly minted Terran officer, I had clearance to review tonight's guest list as well. Chitauri Ambassador Palin was booked for her room C-14, which therefore was my destination. The mission was quite simple. Drop off the parcel, then head to the hangar bay for a well-deserved vacation. All I knew as I set off from my quarters was that this felt right. Several humans crossed my path, but they were of no concern. As long as I acted normal, I knew they wouldn't give me a second glance. My detour to room C-14 was brief anyways, in and out before any onlookers could develop suspicions. It took only a few seconds to slip the package beneath Palin's pillow, and then I carried on to the hangar bay as planned. With any luck, the Chitauri ambassador would notice my correspondence when he retired to his chambers. Would Commander Rykov understand if what I had done ever came to light? If our roles were reversed, I doubted he would abandon Earth. Perhaps in my position, he would have taken similar actions. It was too much to ask of a soldier to turn his back on those he swore to protect. The potential consequences of my decision were not to be understated. I knew that. We were dealing with the humans' warfare, the kind without honor and without winners. This breach not only risked incurring the Terrans' anger, but also elevated the chance of galactic destruction. The more parties that possessed nanite weapons, the more likely it was that someone would use them. But those dangers could be dealt with at a later date. It didn't matter that we were living in a tinderbox unless someone created a spark. I was going to put the terrible things I had witnessed out of my mind, in the hopes that one day they would truly be forgotten. Today, it was my intention to live it up, and hope the humans stayed friends for a little while longer. That would be the end of Why Humans Avoid War Chapter 27, and that would also be the end of the entire series. If you're on Reddit, go to the HFY subreddit and look up Space Paladin 15, for he is the one that wrote this incredible story. He's even got a Patreon linked at the bottom of, well, I'm pretty sure all of the chapters of Why Humans Avoid War. If you liked the video, or if you didn't like or dislike it, tell me what you did like or didn't like in the comments. And if you've got a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well, and if you're going to bed soon, sweet dreams. Ciao.